I did my public policy model research on gun control rights. So people and like the problem, what it looks like. So the gun control debate is focused mainly on repealing gun rights and for law-abiding citizens. The Democratic Party politicians pledged to ban certain firearms and significantly modify our Second Amendment right to bear arms. For an example, to show that what they're saying, the politicians, like in gun control activists, say that fewer guns means less crime. But throughout history, all the places that have very high gun control have the most amount of crime. So, like 1.3% of people convicted of a gun-related crime obtain their gun from a retail store. In other words, 1.3% of guns used in crimes were legally bought and registered at a retail store. The other 98.7% were not legally registered. Criminals tend to not follow gun laws. As you can see in this graph, it shows where people get their guns, and the majority of them get them from off the street or a legal source. So some Lincoln institutions are elections, political parties, special interest groups, state senators, and congressional representatives represent people on both sides of the gun control debate. Democratic Party favors gun control, and the Republican Party favors the traditional interpretation of the Constitution and the Second Amendment. A special interest group would be the National Rifle Association, and they represent law-abiding gun owners. A policy agenda, like the political parties and problems that they want to solve. So Democratic leaders increase gun control by creating more policies and increasing restrictions on what you can and cannot buy. And Republicans support the Second Amendment and the rights of the individuals to protect themselves and others. So some policymaking institutions are state legislatures, U.S. Congress, and the Senate. So, and our state representatives, congressional representatives, senators are part of local and national debates over gun violence and the rights of people who own arms. Democratic-leaning states tend to have the most restrictive gun laws, while Republican-leaning states have less restrictive gun laws. For instance, Chicago and Illinois have very high gun restricting laws, and Montana has very, very few. And some policies are National Firearms Act of 1934, which regulates shotguns, rifles, machine guns, firearm mufflers, and silencers, and the Gun Control Act of 1968, which states you must be 18 years old to buy rifles, shotguns, and ammo, but you must be 21 to buy handguns. The amendment to the 1968 Gun Control Act, also known as the Brady Handgun Violence Prevention Act 1993, requires holders of FFLs to conduct a background check. Potential firearm purchasers fill out a federal form known as the ATF 4473, which checks for prior convictions and other red flags. FFL holders then use the information provided to form the background check. Next, we have the second part of the people. Like, what's the impact that gun control laws have on the people? So, proponents of stricter gun regulations fear for their safety in a country where there is an average of 88 guns per 100 people, according to the 2011 Small Arms Survey. Opponents of regulatory arguments, however, also fear loss of safety. They argue restricting the right to bear arms would leave citizens unable to protect themselves in their daily lives or in a worst-case scenario from a government turned against the people. Some solutions. So instead of passing more laws and restrictions that are ineffective at stopping gun violence, as evidenced in by crime statistics, we need to focus our resources on mental health issues, drug addiction, and education. We need to focus on what causes people to harm others and not the choice of weapon used. I see this as the answer because politicians will never convince law-abiding Americans that they are safer without the right to bear arms. Criminals and the government that turn against their people will never act lawfully. And then here are my citations.